Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, May 5th, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today: Yemeni missile strikes Israel's Ben Gurion airport. So a missile fired from Yemen struck an access road on the grounds of Israel's Ben Gurion airport on Sunday as a heavy U.S. bombing campaign has failed to deter Yemen's Houthis, who are officially known as Ansar Allah. According to the Times of Israel, the Israeli military tried multiple times to intercept the missile but failed. A U.S. missile defense system, the THAAD missile defense system that is deployed to Israel. Recent reports said that the U.S. actually deployed a second one of these missile systems, defense systems, to Israel, but that also failed to intercept the Yemeni missile. So the missile left a crater and 6 people were injured by the attack, though none of them were seriously hurt. So since March 18th, when Israel completely broke the ceasefire in Gaza and restarted its massive bombing campaign, the Houthis have fired a series of missiles and drones at Israel, but this is the first time a missile got past air defenses and actually struck Israel. And I believe last year there was some cases toward the end of the year where the missiles were intercepted and then the shrapnel landed and caused some damage, but I don't remember like a missile from Yemen making a strike like this. So this goes to show that the Houthis could be getting better and adapting to the Israeli air defense systems. So later on Sunday, Houthi military spokesman Yahya Saree announced the Yemeni force would impose a comprehensive air blockade on Israel by repeatedly targeting airports in the country. He said the move was a response to the expanded aggressive operations against Gaza, Israel's expanding operations against Gaza. His announcement came after the Israeli military announced that it was calling up tens of thousands of reservists to expand the assault on Gaza. So Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, said on Sunday that Israel would respond to the Houthi attack. He said, quote, "We acted against them in the past and will act again in the future. This isn't a one and done, but there will be some big hits," end quote. So Israel launched a few rounds of airstrikes on Yemen last year, but has not done so under the Trump administration. In March, when the U.S. first started bombing Yemen again, the Israeli news site Ynet reported that the U.S. has asked Israel not to respond to the Houthis' attacks and said that U.S. forces would handle the retaliation. So the U.S. has been telling Israel, don't worry about it, we'll bomb the Houthis. But after this, I am expecting Israel to maybe launch their own attack, or we might see a joint U.S.-Israeli attack on Yemen. Netanyahu also suggested that Israel could attack Iran in response to the Yemeni missile strike. On X, Netanyahu shared a Truth Social post from President Trump dated March 17th. And in that post, Trump said that he would blame each Houthi attack on Iran. If you remember that, we covered that on this show. And it's an angle of this whole thing we've been covering quite a bit, how the U.S. is blaming Iran for what's happening in Yemen. Netanyahu wrote, quote, "President Trump is absolutely right. Attacks by the Houthis emanate from Iran. Israel will respond to the Houthi attack against our main airport and at a time and place of our choosing to their Iranian terror masters," end quote. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth also recently threatened Iran over the situation in Yemen, something I mentioned in the last show. He accused them of providing lethal support for the Yemeni group and warned that there would be consequences. So, as we discuss a lot, the Houthis are aligned with Iran. They receive political support from them. They probably receive some military support, but we don't know the extent of it. What we do know, and this is something President Trump has acknowledged, that the Houthis make their own missiles inside Yemen, and they make their own drones. So they're domestically made, and U.S. officials have said they have their own independent weapons supply. So that means they're not reliant on Iran, and they're also known to be, independent actors. They have their own interests. They're not going to take orders from Iran either. But Netanyahu could be, Netanyahu wants a U.S.-Iran war. He wants the U.S. to support an attack on Iran, a big attack. And, we know this from all this reporting. So this seems like his strategy here with what happened is to use this missile attack from Yemen to try to get the U.S. on board with an attack on Iran. I bet that's what he's working on right now. And the Houthis, who, of course, are known for their resilience, they're not backing down. The U.S. has launched over 1,000 airstrikes. They've offered to stop attacking U.S. warships if the U.S. stops bombing Yemen, but they're saying they'll continue the blockade on Israel and the attacks on Israel, and the U.S. has shown no interest in this offer, making it very clear that this is a war the U.S. is waging for Israel. And instead of backing them, they could just, make Israel enforce the ceasefire deal in Gaza by leveraging military aid, and all of this would go away. But instead, it's just escalation. Everything's just escalating, and we're going in the direction of a potential war with Iran. All right, so the next one here, 14 reported injured by U.S. airstrikes on Yemeni capital. So Yemen's Al Masirah TV reported that U.S. airstrikes hit the Yemeni capital of Sana'a on Sunday night, hitting shops in the Shu'ab district and a commercial district and injuring 14 civilians. A total of 3 U.S. airstrikes were reported in Sana'a, and other U.S. attacks hit the Al Jawf province. According to Yemen's Saba news agency, the U.S. also struck the Ras Issa fuel port in the Red Sea province of Hodeidah, which was the site of major U.S. airstrikes on April 17th that killed 80 civilians, and that's according to the Yemen Data Project. So this kind of just came out. I wrote this not too long before I started recording. Not too many details on the strike, but it looks like there's pictures and videos of the aftermath of these strikes and it looks like shops were damaged in the capital, and at least 14 people injured. No word yet that anyone was killed. And also on Sunday, the foreign ministry of the Houthi-led Yemeni government warned of potential escalation against the U.S. if airstrikes continued. The ministry said that the, quote, continued U.S. targeting of civilians and civilian objects will push Yemen to engage in potentially escalatory military options that will have a significant impact on the United States and the usurping Zionist entity, end quote. Then I mentioned other things that happened, obviously the Houthi missile attack on Israel. But, when we see these kind of threats of escalation from the Houthis, it's not something to just dismiss. They do tend to be full of surprises. It was during the Yemen war, the Saudi war against them, when they started hitting all these oil fields, deep inside Saudi Arabia. And they developed that capability while they were under siege, while they were under bombing campaigns. So there's just always the chance of them finding a new way to hit the U.S. And there's a lot of ways to hit the U.S. in the region. There's so many different bases. We haven't seen them try to target a U.S. military base yet, but I wouldn't be surprised because there's certainly a few in striking distance of their missiles. All right, so the next one here, Trump wants Iran to dismantle nuclear program. So President Trump said in an interview that aired on Sunday that he wants the total dismantlement of Iran's civilian nuclear program, a condition that's a non-starter for Tehran. He said, quote, total dismantlement. Yes, that is all I would accept, end quote. So this is an interview he did with NBC's Meet the Press. So he said at first, total dismantlement, it's all I would accept. Then he suggested he might be open to allowing Iran to maintain a civilian nuclear program to produce energy, but he sounded skeptical of the idea. He said, quote, there's a new theory going out there that Iran would be allowed to have civilian, meaning to make electricity, but I say they have so much oil, what do they need it for, end quote. And he was asked about Secretary of State Marco Rubio's recent suggestion that Iran could maintain a civilian nuclear program. He said, quote, people are talking about that, and this is something that's really pretty new in the dialogue. My inclination is to say, what do you need that for? You have a lot of oil, end quote. And then again, he said that he's open to hearing about this idea of Iran maintaining a civilian nuclear program. And of course, total dismantlement, just complete non-starter. And that demand, if that's really the demand that he's making, that they're making in talks with Iran, then the talks aren't going to go anywhere. Then there's not going to be a deal. But what Marco Rubio has been saying is civilian nuclear program, but with no uranium enrichment. And that's another red line for Iran. They say they're not giving up their uranium enrichment. Marco Rubio has claimed that there's no other country on earth that has a civilian nuclear program that enriches its own uranium that doesn't have nuclear weapons, but that is not true. That is a lie that he's told in at least one interview. I know Japan, Germany, Brazil, I believe the Netherlands all have enrichment programs, but no nuclear weapons. And Rubio said this again, I believe it was this past Friday. He says Iran has to walk away from uranium enrichment. So after Trump made these comments about full dismantlement, he got a pat on the back from some Iran hawks, including Senator Tom Cotton, who's really one of the biggest Iran hawks in the Senate, in Congress. He said on X, quote, "President Trump is right. Iran's terrorist regime must dismantle its entire nuclear program," end quote. And negotiations between the U.S. and Iran have been faltering. The fourth round was supposed to happen this past Saturday, but that got postponed. And these comments from Trump are going to damage the talks even more. And I mean, if these talks just fall apart, I mean, what they've been saying, what Trump has been saying is that they're going to bomb Iran. And all these reports we've seen about the deliberations about attacking Iran, even the people in the administration who are warning against it, like I know that New York Times report about it, said that J.D. Vance was against it, but he said, let's give diplomacy a shot. And if we don't reach a deal, then we could, do the military option. So there is a really good chance here of the U.S., I mean, just be a complete disaster, but there's a lot of bad signs here. All right, so the next one here, Trump fired Waltz because he wanted to attack Iran. So this article is from Responsible Statecraft. So I think it was in the last show I talked about how Waltz, he was fired as National Security Advisor, but he's being moved over to the UN ambassador spot. And initially, my reading of it was over the Signal chat. I didn't think it was really related to the whole Iran thing. But according to a new report, there is some Iran-related stuff here. So this article is from Ben Armbruster. President Trump sacked his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, because he was working with a foreign leader to push the United States to attack Iran, according to a new report in the Washington Post. The Post reports that while including a journalist on a Signal chat about plans to attack Yemen's Houthis sealed Waltz's fate, Waltz initially upset Trump during Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's White House visit in February. So this is a few months back, when he appeared to share the Israeli leader's conviction that the time was ripe to strike Iran. The report says that Waltz appeared to have engaged in intense coordination with Netanyahu about military options against Iran ahead of an Oval Office meeting between the Israeli leader and Trump, the two people said. Waltz wanted to take U.S. policy in a direction Trump wasn't comfortable with because the U.S. hadn't attempted a diplomatic solution, according to one of the people. And it got back to Trump, and he was not happy with it. The view by some in the administration was that Waltz was trying to tip the scale in favor of military action and was operating hand in glove with the Israelis. So since Trump announced that he would engage in serious negotiations with Iranian leaders to place limits on Iran's nuclear program, an intense battle is being waged between the president's more loyal supporters who favor diplomatic engagement and neoconservatives who don't want to deal with Iran and are instead pushing for war. So again, it is amazing. I mean, if it was any other country that the national security advisor was plotting with to attack, to start a war, he wouldn't just be pushed aside over to the UN. He would be fired immediately. So Waltz was extremely hawkish on Iran. The thing is, is that so is Marco Rubio, and Rubio is now the acting national security advisor and still the Secretary of State. So even though the firing was related to Iran, and it's good that Waltz is out of there, I guess, to an extent, we don't know who his permanent replacement is going to be, and his temporary replacement is just as hawkish. I saw one report in mine was from Axios about these internal deliberations, and Rubio was on Waltz's side that they think that military action is the way to go. And then in the last few days we've seen all these things, threats from Hegseth, Trump saying full dismantlement, the talks being postponed, now this attack on Yemen that Netanyahu looks like he wants to leverage into attacking Iran. So things just are not looking good when it comes to the prospects for potential war with Iran. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills 110 Gazans in 3 days as children starve. So Israeli attacks on Gaza killed 110 Palestinians and wounded 400 over the past 3 days, according to death toll updates released by Gaza's health ministry, as children are starving to death under the U.S.-backed Israeli blockade. In the same 3-day period, 7 bodies of Palestinians killed by previous Israeli attacks were recovered from the rubble. A sad picture here of what looks like a baby in a shroud. You can't actually see the baby, but Israeli attacks over the weekend included the bombing of a house in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, and according to rescue workers, the strike killed 8 people, including a month-old baby, a 1-year-old girl, and a 1-year-old boy. Just one attack there. And Israeli strikes on Sunday included attacks on tent camps in Al-Mawasi, killing at least 10 people. Clashes were reported in southern Gaza on Sunday as Hamas's armed wing, the Al-Qassam brigades, claimed that its fighters killed IDF soldiers in an ambush near Rafah. Later in the day, the IDF confirmed 2 of its soldiers were killed in a booby-trapped tunnel near Rafah. So on Saturday, Al Jazeera reported that a baby girl named Janan Saleh al-Sakafi died of malnutrition and dehydration at the Runtisi hospital near Gaza City, as the Israeli blockade has as the Israeli military has blocked all goods from entering Gaza for more than 2 months. So a baby girl starved to death over the weekend because of this U.S.-backed Israeli blockade. And according to Gaza's government media office, 57 Palestinians have starved to death in Gaza, the majority being children. The UN's World Food Program and UNRWA, they both say they have aid ready to go. They have thousands of trucks ready to go in Gaza, but every day Israel blocks it, and every day it looks like more and more people are dying of starvation. And the Times of Israel reported Sunday night that the Israeli Security Cabinet voted to expand the assault on Gaza and approved a plan to renew aid deliveries while overhauling the mechanism in order to minimize diversion of the goods by Hamas. So that's the allegation, is that Hamas is diverting the goods. But this report said that aid deliveries are not imminent and would only happen when the situation in Gaza necessitates it, making it unclear if the Israeli military will actually allow any food to enter. And as I understand, what their supposed plan is to only hand out food directly to Palestinian families in like so-called humanitarian zones, but it's not clear who would actually be handing out the food. It doesn't really seem like a practical plan to really bring relief. And again, there's just no sign that this is happening anytime soon. And every day people are starving and dying. And every day, Trump could get on the phone with Netanyahu and tell him, let the aid in, or you're not getting a single more bomb from me, or we're going to stop maintaining your planes, or we're going to do this. He has so many ways to leverage Netanyahu, but every day that he doesn't, people are dying. And it's just absolutely horrific what's happening. Some of the stuff on the numbers here. Gaza's health ministry also said on Sunday that since Israel resumed its genocidal war on March 18th, it has recorded the deaths of 2,436 Palestinians and 6,450 injuries. So it's just been a very brutal month and a half in Gaza. The next one here, Israel calling up tens of thousands of reservists to expand in Gaza. So this one's from Al Jazeera. And again, another thing, we have some stories in the lower part of the page, but the children, all the pictures of these emaciated children, I see more and more different children every day, just look like skin and bones. And it's just, I don't know what to say. It's just, this is not just Israel doing this, it's the United States. And it's our government, and it's just shameful. And it just seems like it's barely getting the attention that it deserves. All right, so this story here. So the Israeli military will call up tens of thousands of reservists to expand the country's assault on the besieged Gaza Strip. Army Chief Eyal Zamir says he made the announcement on Sunday after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised to continue the war despite growing calls from inside Israel for a deal that would bring home Israeli captives held in Gaza and end the war, which has killed more than 52,000 Palestinians. So he said, quote, "This week we're sending tens of thousands of draft orders to our reserve personnel to intensify and expand our action in Gaza. We are increasing the pressure to return our people and defeat Hamas." End quote. So it looks like in the coming weeks they plan to really escalate things, in the situation. It's just gonna get worse. All right, so the next one here, Israel bombs humanitarian aid flotilla on the way to Gaza. So this article, Will Porter wrote this up for us on Friday. This is really just outrageous here. A ship carrying supplies bound for the Gaza Strip was attacked by Israeli drones in international waters on Friday, according to the activist group that organized the flotilla. The vessel reportedly took at least one direct hit to its hull and sustained damage from fire, forcing its crew to issue an urgent call for help. Organizers with the Freedom Flotilla Coalition said one of their vessels was attacked by an unidentified drone in the early hours of Friday morning, noting the ship was not far off the coast of Malta when it was hit. So very far from Gaza, very far from Israel, where this ship was hit. So it looks like, the crew was okay. There was no casualties, but they were hit in the middle of the night, and they were, they needed help in international waters, right after midnight. So a spokesperson for the group told Reuters that the ship was struck en route to Malta, where it was scheduled to pick up other activists. Among them was Greta Thunberg, the climate activist, and also retired U.S. Army Colonel Mary Ann Wright. The group said that it had arranged the aid shipment under a media blackout to avoid any potential sabotage. So they were going to try to bring aid to Israel, and they were keeping it on the down low, and I didn't hear anything about it. But I guess Israel became wise to their plans and decided to attack them. And it's just another thing. You would think this would be bigger news, more of a story here, but it looks like the ship now is in Malta, and they're trying to get repairs there. Not clear what their plan is now for trying to bring aid to Gaza. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. okays training and maintenance for Ukraine's F-16s. So the State Department has approved a potential $310 million arms sale to Ukraine for training and sustainment of the country's fleet of U.S.-made F-16 fighter jets, signaling that the Trump administration is preparing to provide long-term military support. So the Pentagon's Defense Security Cooperation Agency said the sale will include aircraft modifications, upgrades, personnel training, maintenance, sustainment support, and other types of equipment. Several of the U.S.'s European allies have provided Ukraine with F-16 fighter jets, and the U.S., under the Biden administration, was involved in training Ukrainian pilots. A report from the War Zone just revealed that the U.S. has been providing Ukraine with decommissioned, non-operational F-16 fighter jets for spare parts. And that's what a U.S. Air Force spokesman confirmed this to the War Zone, saying that these were not flyable F-16s, but they're sending them over there so their spare parts can be used, whatever salvageable. So the approval of the F-16 training and sustainment deal came a few days after the Trump administration moved forward with its very first arms sale for Ukraine by notifying Congress of its plans to approve the export of unspecified defense articles worth $50 million or more. So this is the second arms sale that we've seen the Trump administration move forward to Ukraine within the past week. And again, this is a sign that they're preparing to just continue supplying Ukraine's military, keep this proxy war going if the peace talks fall apart, which is seeming more and more likely. And of course, that the minerals deal includes this clause that any future U.S. military aid is counted as a contribution. So it's not a good sign here. And the F-16s, when they first provided the F-16s, I mean, that was a huge escalation of this proxy war, providing them with Western aircraft like that. All right, so the next one here, Trump says the U.S. may walk away from Ukraine-Russia talks. So this one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. Another thing from Trump's Meet the Press interview. So he said that at some point his administration may give up on attempting to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. He said, quote, "I do believe we're closer with one party and maybe not as close with the other, but we'll have to see. 5,000 soldiers a week on average are dying. They're not American soldiers, but I want to solve the problem," end quote. And he wouldn't say which country was the greater barrier to reaching an agreement. But essentially, he's just saying that the U.S. might walk away from the negotiations soon. And when I initially saw Trump administration officials saying this, I was hoping that meant they would cut off the military aid to Ukraine, because that's what it's going to take to end this war. But it sounds like with these moves they've been making with the arms sales and everything, sounds like no, they're just planning to keep everything going. And this is something I think Rubio and Waltz, want want it to happen from the beginning. I think Rubio's done a good job of, his rhetoric, trying to align more with Trump and his base. But I think he's still the same old Marco Rubio. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills more civilians in Syria strikes. So this one's from Jason Ditz. So another big thing that happened over the weekend, I believe this was on Friday, Israel launched some 20 airstrikes on Syria, including some against or near the presidential palace in Damascus, essentially as a threat that they could kill Shara if, and the pretext that they're using here is to protect the Druze minority because there's been these clashes. But as Jason points out here, there was a drone strike that same day against a farm in Syria that killed 4 Druze civilians. So they're claiming that they're protecting them, and they're also bombing them too. But this is clearly Israel's pretext to solidify its occupation of southern Syria and keep the pressure on the Syrian government. They just want a total failed state that doesn't have any kind of military that can threaten them after helping the regime change that ousted Assad. So, and there's reports too that the Druze leaders reached a deal with the Syrian government, the HTS-led government, which involved allowing them to increase the number of local forces defending the Suwaida area where there were some of these clashes, and they're trying to work out some kind of deal with this Syrian government that's led by al-Shara, the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, which is who the U.S. and Israel helped put in power in Damascus. All right, so the next one here, Turkish jets interfere with Israeli warplanes attacking Syria. So this one is from Jason as well. As Israel continues to escalate its attacks across Syria, they are running into some resistance from Turkey. Turkey is reportedly frustrated with the growing Israeli strikes on Syria, and there was an incident over the weekend where 2 Turkish F-16 fighter jets were scrambled into Syrian airspace and interfered with Israeli warplanes actively attacking targets inside Syria. It's interesting. You got both sides using American fighter jets here. Officials are saying there was no direct conflict between the planes, though it is also being called the first direct contact between the two sides inside Syria. The Turkish plane reportedly tried to use electronic countermeasures to try to warn the Israeli planes off. Details are still relatively scant on the matter, and the IDF denied that anything happened at all, maintaining that they have full freedom of operation to carry out attacks inside Syria. So both Turkey and Israel supported the regime change in Syria. Turkey obviously very involved, backing HTS in Idlib for all those years, basically giving them protection from the Assad government and Russia from taking that territory, letting them, exist there and grow and prepare for the offensive that ousted Assad. But the Turkey and Israel, it seems like they're headed for some kind of clash in Syria. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see some kind of kinetic action against each other. And then what happens there? You got a NATO ally in Israel fighting against each other in Syria. It could be a real mess. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. OK's $3.5 billion missile sale to Saudi Arabia. So the State Department has approved a $3.5 billion sale of air-to-air missiles to Saudi Arabia ahead of President Trump's planned visit to the country. The Pentagon said the sale includes 1,000 AIM advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles, related equipment, and U.S. government contracting services, and these missiles can be fired by Saudi Arabia's fleet of U.S.-made F-15 fighter jets. President Trump is scheduled to arrive in Saudi Arabia on May 13th and is expected to announce a series of new arms sales to the kingdom. According to Reuters, he could unveil over $100 billion in weapons deals. So Axios has reported that on May 14th, Trump will attend a summit in Saudi Arabia of leaders from the GCC states. That includes the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Oman. And the visit to Saudi Arabia will mark Trump's second foreign trip after his brief visit to Italy for Pope Francis's funeral. But this is his first, he went to Rome for the funeral, obviously, but this is a different type of trip. This is like an official visit to another country, and he's making Saudi Arabia the first. And of course, in his first administration, he had very close ties with the Saudis, advancing huge weapons sales, backing them very strongly in their brutal war in Yemen, which killed, just hundreds of thousands of Yemeni civilians. Trump supported that all the way, and he actually vetoed a war powers resolution passed by Congress to end U.S. support for that war. He vetoed that in 2019. So very staunchly supportive of that Saudi war. So, that could be an aspect of it. So far, it looks like the Saudis have not wanted anything to do with this new bombing campaign against the Houthis because they're afraid that their oil infrastructure is going to start getting targeted again. So I wonder if that's something that the U.S. might try to persuade them to join in on the war again. I think that's possible. One thing, according to Middle East Eye, the Saudis told the Trump administration that they're not going to discuss the idea of normalization with Israel. They've made clear that as long as this genocidal war in Gaza continues, that they will not normalize with Israel, and they're saying they don't even want to discuss it because that's something Trump really wants to push, is the expanding the Abraham Accords. All right, so the next one here, Trump proposes a $1.01 trillion military budget for 2026. So the White House released a budget plan on Friday proposing $1.01 trillion in military spending for 2026, a 13% increase from this year. The proposal fulfills President Trump's vow to bring the official U.S. military budget to over $1 trillion for the first time. The increase in U.S. military spending will include funding for President Trump's plans for a major missile defense system for the U.S., which he has dubbed the Iron Dome for America, which will likely kick off a new global arms race. Despite the massive increase, Trump is facing pushback from some Republican hawks who are complaining that the White House is relying on a reconciliation bill for some of the funds. According to Senator Roger Wicker, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, the White House is asking Congress for $892.6 billion in military spending for the fiscal year 2026, which is about the same as the 2025 budget. So if you follow this, it's a little confusing. So apparently this is what the White House, when they make their budget request, they're asking for $892.6 billion for military spending. But their budget proposal includes, is for the Pentagon is $1.01 trillion. It's mostly for the Pentagon. I believe some other that goes to some other government agencies, but the vast majority of it goes to the Pentagon. So they request the $892 billion from Congress, and then for like the official budget, and then they want to use $119 billion from this budget bill that the Congress is working on right now. And I covered this recently. It's going to increase military spending by $150 billion. And that bill, as I understood it, as the report said at the time, I thought it was going to apply to the 2025 budget, but they want to use most of it for the 2026 budget to bring it over $1 trillion. So the hawks, the Republicans, are not happy about this because I think this will make it harder to maintain, to make like the 1.01 trillion like the default, like, because then the budget request for 2027 might not be based on that. I think that's their thinking. They just want to solidify, make sure that it's not that like they appropriate for 2026, the whole 1.01 trillion. I think they want to set that precedent of this huge increase and this huge military budget and not rely on like supplemental funding. That seems to be what they're complaining about. I have a quote here from Mitch McConnell that you kind of get what he's saying. He said, quote, and again, this is McConnell, quote, "It is peculiar how much time the president's advisors spend talking about restoring peace through strength, given how apparently unwilling they've been to invest accordingly in the national defense or in other critical instruments of national power. Make no mistake, a one-time influx reconciliation spending is not a substitute for full-year appropriations," end quote. So again, complaining that there's this reconciliation bill that they're going to rely on for the $119 billion. And so whenever we discuss this, the U.S. hasn't had an official $1 trillion military budget. When you factor in other things like the interest on the debt spent on military, other departments like Veterans Affairs, you get close to, this is really going to get us close to $2 trillion. According to Winslow Wheeler, who is a veteran defense analyst, based on the $895 billion NDAA for 2025, he expected total U.S. military spending for 2025 to actually reach $1.77 trillion. So again, going over that $1 trillion mark makes what they're actually going to spend closer to 2 trillion. But the Hawks are complaining, like the Ultra Hawks are complaining because they really want to get this official on paper, I guess, $1 trillion budget, and they don't want to have to get these like additional bills on top of it, I guess. But it's still an over $1 trillion military budget that Trump's proposing. So if that's not too confusing. So that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Ramsey Baroud, how Gaza war has exposed fault lines among Israeli elites. One from Daniel McAdams, end the Ukraine war with this one simple trick. And I think you know what that trick is. One from Andrea Bartoli, from Gaza to Kiev, Pope's message was consistent and he was often mocked for it. One from Ted Snyder, can diplomacy stop the war in Ukraine? Dueling peace plans. One from Branko Marchtich, Reagan was criticized for diplomacy too. So please go check all that out. I hope everyone had a good weekend. So much stuff going on. You could always support this show by sharing it, comment, like, subscribe. All that stuff helps out. Follow us on all the social media. Antiwar.com has an account on X, on TikTok, on Instagram. You can follow me on X as well. But that is it for me for today. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.